Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Melbourne Traditionalist podcast, episode 53. Today, I'm going to be talking about art. Now, I was born in 1970, and by that stage, art was pretty awful. And, it didn't matter what form you were talking about, it was generally pretty awful. And my personal experience with art was that it was awful and we shouldn't really pay much attention to it. And, I could look at older art and see that it didn't used to be terrible, but today it was. And like most people, I just wondered why was that? Why was it that in the past they could actually produce masterpieces, beauty, and today it's just awful? Well, hopefully I'll be able to provide some answers here as I talk about the history of art in a very broad term and talk about our society and how those two things interact. Now, when I was at school, I did art and I didn't really learn very much and I didn't get much appreciation for art. And occasionally in my life, I've seen things and gone, wow, that's really amazing. Art can create such beauty. And so often it's not doing that job. It's not creating anything that you look at and admire. And a handful of times that I've been to the National Gallery of Victoria, and each time I've actually really liked it. I've really liked the art on display. And I remember once I went there to see a exhibition of old masters. And I was there with my mother and I was saying, oh, this person's this and this person's that and so forth, And she was like, oh, wow, I had no idea you knew all this information, and it was just random little bits that I'd picked up. So I came out of there very chuffed with myself. But some of the art there is truly amazing, and then others you look at and you just go, oh wow, someone paid money for that. Oh yeah, we paid money for that. There's a big room in the National Gallery of Victoria where they have all these modern art pieces, and there's a security guard always on duty in this room, and he just wanders around this really dreary room. And even though he's a foreign security guard, I every time I go there I feel sorry for him. And the art's just awful. It's just terrible, and it's always telling that there's a security guard in the room, and I want to know the history. Why is that guard there? Because he's always there. It would be a very interesting story. But you go to some of the other paintings and there's no guards there. There's no one there. You can just wander around and and really enjoy the gallery. There's two really great paintings there at the gallery. One is the charge at Waterloo, and the horses are just in front of your face. You stand a metre away and the horses are there, that big, as big as they would be in real life. And it's a terrifying picture. And most people would say, "Oh no, it's not. It's war's awful. There's blood and guts, and there's no blood and guts." And I stand there in front of this painting and I say, "You've got no imagination. In a second, 2 seconds, maybe 3 seconds, you're going to be very bloody, and your guts is going to be everywhere, because those horses are right there in front of you." And they're charging. It's amazing. It's like an action photograph, but all in colour and a fantastic size. And then there's another one, which is actually quite dreary. It's very dark, and there's a lamb, and right next to the lamb is its mother, and all around them are crows. There's probably 30, 60 crows. There's an enormous amount of crows. And it's obviously what's happening. The lamb's dying. The lamb is dying and its mother is there. And it's you can feel the mother saying, don't die, don't die. And you can feel all the crows saying, hurry up and die. We're hungry. We need to eat too. We need to live. And that the lamb can't feed this many crows, that the crows are going to go hungry whether the lamb lives or dies. And it's such a powerful painting. It's so it's so dark, but it's also, what's the right word? It's got that pathos. You really feel every emotion. You feel the lamb and how vulnerable it is, and you feel the mother and her maternal instincts, and then you feel the crows, and they're like, hey, we've got a right to live too. We're not monsters. We've just got to live, and everyone's going to be disappointed, no matter what the outcome is. Everyone's going to be disappointed, and that's the power of art. That you can look at a painting and feel so much emotion, and the technical skill is great, but it's not a beautiful painting. You don't look at it and think of the beauty. And I think a lot of modern people will look at it and just think, oh, it's too dreary, it's too depressing. But once you sit down and actually pay attention to this painting, it's just amazingly powerful. Now, a lot of people ask, well, what is art? So I put into Google, what is art? And it came up with a whole bunch of definitions. Wikipedia says art is a diverse range of human activities in creating visual, auditory, or performing artifacts, expressing the author's imagination, conceptual ideas, or technical skills, intended to be appreciated primarily for their beauty or emotional power. Leo Tolstoy has, art is the activity by which a person, having experienced an emotion, intentionally transmits it to others. Thought Co. There is no one universal definition of visual art, though there is a general consensus that art is the conscious creation of something beautiful or meaningful using skill and imagination. Merriam-Webster, the dictionary people, skill acquired by experience, study, or observation. And Mental Floss has an article, 27 responses to the question, what is art? Yeah, well, might leave that one alone. I actually think that Thought Co. is the best definition that we have here. A general consensus that art is the conscious creation of something beautiful or meaningful using skill and imagination. And beauty or meaningful skill, I think, is the important part, because when you look at the Wikipedia entry, it says expressing the author's imagination. And so often, that's what makes art terrible. The author, the artist, the person creating the art, because they're told that they have to bring something to the art. It can't be a copy. And that's what I want to talk about next, about the difference in art between the East and the West. Now, in the West, if I could paint as well as Rembrandt, I wouldn't be appreciated. And by as well as, I mean, I can basically paint exactly the same picture that Rembrandt has made, and I can sell it. Now, I don't sign his name, I sign mine. So it's a copy, all right? Everyone knows it's a copy. There's no deceit going on. But people will say, why are you wasting your talent? Why are you impersonating a better man? And I'd say, well, he's not a better man. I can paint as well as he can. We're actually equals. and people would scoff at that. Because in the West, what we appreciate is novelty, variety, newness. It has to be original. And to create something that someone has already created is not original. And what's interesting is that is the exact opposite of how art is viewed in the East. And you can see this over and over in Oriental history. You'll see that art will reach a certain level and then it will just stop. It won't progress any further. And the reason for that is while an art form is not perfect, then it's quite possible to innovate. But once an art form has reached perfection, it's as good as it can ever be, then innovation is fakery. You can't do better than perfection. So now every student must now seek to be as good as the master. And the only way to achieve that is to copy. You must try and create as good as the master has already created. So that's the end of that. In the West, as I said, it's all about originality. You have to do something new. The problem is that it's much easier to create something new than it is to create something new and good. So we have effectively put ourselves into a cul-de-sac because we insist that an artist must be original. What we don't insist on is an artist must be good. So we get a lot of junk art and it's praised. And artists are a bit confused by people's attitude. Why is it that artists have such high status as a profession, but at the same time they are so derided as shucksters, as people who are effectively frauding everyone else? And the reason is that difference between original and good. And they are told their entire career, their entire life, it's not good enough to create a copy. You must be original. You must create your own distinct art form, your own distinct art. And then when they do that, people say, well, that's shit. That's terrible. And, you know, a lot of artists are very, very conflicted by that. They're very confused. They don't often say it, but you can hear it in the way they speak. They're very, I'm not sure what the right word is. They have that confliction. They know that something's wrong. And maybe it is that they can't quite put their finger on what it is that is exactly wrong. But they know that something's wrong. Something's not right. For at least the last 500 years, the king of art has been painting. And painting was once both a thing of beauty and a practical skill, not just in that it involves a physical labour, but that it was the only way to truly represent something. So you could, you know, a king who wanted to marry off his daughter could have a painting done of her and sent away so people could see what she looked like. You know, a mother could have a painting done of her children so she could see, she could have a memory of what her children looked like. Noblemen would have paintings done of their possessions so that it would always be recorded what they owned. So it had a practical aspect as well as an artistic aspect. But that was destroyed by photography. Photography took away a lot of the practical aspect of the visual arts, particularly painting, because now that could all be done cheaper, quicker, easier by a photograph. So where did that leave painting? Well, it left it gradually worse off. Now, it didn't happen overnight, because photography itself took probably 50 years between, yes, it's possible to take a photograph, and yes, it's practical to take a photograph. But in that time, you can see that there is a decline in art, and art that was crystal clear, just beautiful in its application, led to new forms of art. And you can see that most clearly with Impressionism. You know, Impressionism has a beauty of its own, you know, like looking through a window after it's raining and seeing the world all distorted, but still with its own beauty. Or that dreamlike state, you know, when you're becoming tired and your eyes aren't quite focused, and you get all those colours mishing together, and that has its own beauty. But what it's not is a faithful representation of reality. And that's what you see in Impressionism. You see it go from an art form that is as good as anything that has come before, and slowly sink into oblivion. Because after that, then people start looking for new art forms. What's the next original idea? And slowly we get into abstractism and cubism and all that kind of rubbish. And, you know, occasionally you can look at these modernist paintings, and I know that has a particular meaning in painting, but in a general sense, you know, everything from 1900 onwards, you know, and occasionally you'll see art and you'll go, wow, that's really great. You know, that's really good. Or, hey, this isn't as good as it was 100 years ago, but it's still got its own charm to it. You know, a lot of 20th century landscapes are like that. You know, they're not like they were before, but they still have a charm to them, and you can still appreciate them in a visual sense and an artistic sense. But I must confess that that abstract leave me cold. I don't see any purpose to them. I don't see any beauty. You know, and occasionally, yeah, all right, but it's a rare thing for me to actually look at something that's abstract, whether it's sculpture, whether it's painting, or what have you, and say, oh yeah, I really like that. I really think that's an impressive piece of art. So why is that? Why is it that art has gotten so terrible? I mentioned photography and I mentioned originality, but I think that there's a third aspect to this, and that is that we've forgotten why art existed in the first place. And art exists to beautify and to glorify. And most of the art that exists today does not exist to do either of those things. You know, you look at ancient art and it was to glorify man, or to glorify God or a God. It was to glorify a ruler or his state. It was to glorify his victories. But very rarely, in fact practically never, do you see in the ancient world an artist just saying, I just want to create this because, you know, I just like it. Which is what we constantly get now. It's all about the individual and what the individual vision can bring to the world, instead of actually the artist glorifying something bigger than himself. And that glorification has to include beauty in some form. It has to include that awe factor. And let's face it, when you see someone who is beautiful, you are awed by them. That's what art should do. It should awe you. It should inspire you. It should make you go, wow, I had no idea that human beings were capable of creating something like that. And that's why modern art doesn't do it for me, because that doesn't do that. In fact, it seems expressly the opposite. Instead of looking at the grand and the glorious, it is instead looking at the mundane and the nothingness. And that's a big problem. Now, talking about ancient art, I wanted to talk about a particular piece of modern art, correction, of ancient art, and that is the Dying Gall. Now, the Dying Gall, I hope I will be able to attach to this. And the Dying Gall is a sculpture. Today, it's in marble, although it's believed that that is a copy and that the original was in bronze. Although, if that's true, that doesn't exist, and we've never found it. And it's possible that it never did exist, that this is the original, but we believe it's a copy. And we believe that because it's more in a Hellenistic style, so it's more Greek. And the Gauls were a people also known as the Celts. You would have heard of them. We think of them in Britain and in France, but they actually occupied a huge area of Central Europe, including Germany, and they attacked Rome. They sacked Rome in 390 BC. They attacked Greece, and they sacked many Greek cities in the 300 BC. And in fact, they also got into Asia Minor, what we now call Turkey, and they set up a kingdom there known as Galatia. And it's believed that this Celt was a Galatian from Asia Minor. And it's also believed that a Greek city near there is where the original sculpture was made. The first time that we hear about it, it's not recorded in the ancient world. The first time that it's recorded is in 1623 in Rome. And a very wealthy family in Rome, let me find the thing, the Ludovici family, they were building a villa, and it's believed that they found it while they were excavating to create this their family villa. And then in a few decades later, it became part of the Pope's collection, part of the Vatican collection. And then in 1804, Napoleon took it as a trophy back to Paris, and it was in the Louvre until 1816 when it was returned to Rome. And it's only been out of Rome one other time, and that was in 2014 till 2013 to 14, when it was on display in Washington DC. Apart from that, it's always been in Rome, and it was originally known as the Dying Gladiator. And it was only in the 1800s, the late 1800s, that scholars looked at it and went, "That's not a gladiator. That's a Gaul." So it's known as the Dying Gall, although sometimes it's called the Dying Galatian, and occasionally you'll still hear the old name that it was known as before the 1900s, which is the Dying Gladiator. Today, like nearly all ancient sculptures, it's just bare marble. But in ancient times, sculptures were often painted. Sometimes they were painted very lifelike, and sometimes they were painted very gaudily. And the Dying Gall may have been painted. There is a wound, a small wound on him, on the figure, but it may have actually been painted and been much more gruesome when it was originally around in ancient times. But of course, if there was paint there, it's long gone. The figure is naked. The only piece of clothing that he wears is a torque, which is a type of necklace. Now, there is some discussion about why he's nude. There are some people who say, well, it's humiliation. But actually, in Greek sculpture, heroes are nearly always depicted naked. Not always, but it's a very common theme. And as this is a Hellenistic sculpture, it is probably most likely showing his heroic nature, that while he is a barbarian, he knows how to die. He's not a coward. And this is showing the honour of a defeated foe. This sculpture has been very influential in Western art, and not just in the visual arts, but also in poetry. Byron actually wrote a stanza about it in his poem Childe Harold's Pilgrimage. Now, child, spelt with an E at the end, is an old term for it was a medieval title for a young man who was a candidate for knighthood. So it's not what we think of as a child. But the stanza reads, I see before me the gladiator lie. He leans upon his hand, his manly brow, consents to death but conquers agony, and his drooped head sinks gradually low, and through his side the last drops, ebbing slow, from the red gash fall heavy one by one. Now, that's when you start to get real art, when it actually inspires other art. When you look around us at what's on display, how much of the modern art that we see around us actually inspires people in other art forms to create more art? Yeah, not much. So I guess the three things that I want to leave people with is one, an appreciation for the Dying Gall, which I think is a masterpiece. I'm not the only one. But also about why we have failed in art. Photography has taken that practical skill away. Secondly, we've got that obsession with originality. Everything's got to be new, and that takes away from what's good. So instead of producing good art, we are obsessed with creating new art. And thirdly, that taking away of the idea of glory, that art exists to glorify something other than the artist, that the artist is actually the least important part of art, and that he should be reflecting something greater than himself, God, man, achievements, things that he is merely an instrument for, instead of being the spotlight. The spotlight should be on the art and the thing that the art is glorifying, not on the man. And with that, I think I will leave you to go about your business. Have a good day. I hope you've enjoyed the episode. And if you would like to support my work, you can by going to Subscribestar. The link will be in the description box below. And have a good week, everyone. Bye-bye.